Quick reminder before we get started, I am releasing the first episode of my Crossing the Line with M. William Phelps Presents limited series, 34 Fairview Road, focused on the death of John O'Keefe and the prosecution of Karen Reed, this Thursday, October 17th, 2024 at 6 p.m. This is a 10-episode narrative podcast and will not affect weekly episodes of Crossing the Line, which will continue on schedule. Life seems to be blessing Michael Kuznik and his wife, Trina Tomola, with all the benefits associated with hard work, raising 3 children, and having a loving family. 2 days before Easter 2017, on Good Friday, all of that changes when the happy couple fail to come home from work, and their eldest child sets out to search for them, soon coming upon what is the unthinkable. And as an investigation begins, there seems to be more questions than answers, as a killer or killers are on the loose. My name is M. William Phelps. I'm an investigative journalist and the true crime author of close to 50 books. I've dedicated the past 20 years of my life to helping families of the missing and murdered. Join me. We're crossing the line. 47-year-old Michael Kuznik and his wife, 46-year-old Trina Tomola, own and operate Mr. Cars 2, a neighborhood used car business in downtown Cleveland on East 185th Street near Hiller Avenue. Location is everything in the used car trade, and Mr. Cars is right in the middle of what is one of those old-school, big city neighborhoods with small businesses and retail shops, several local bars and restaurants, bustling with activity and people. Not far from Lake Erie, Mr. Cars sells a variety of vehicles, including high-end Mercedes, BMWs, and other big-dollar cars. Michael and Trina are well-suited for the job. Kind, gentle, caring individuals who know how to talk to people. Other business owners in the neighborhood look up to the happy couple as an example to follow. As the years passed from the late 2000s into 2017, the neighborhood, known as Collinwood, sees an increase in crime and violence. Many of the people who had lived there all their lives say it just isn't the same homey family atmosphere it used to be, and business is suffering for it. Trina had actually been interviewed by Cleveland's local News 5 investigative reporter, Sarah Budazin, in March 2017, an interview that had not yet aired as of April 14th that same year. In that interview, Trina says this: "We have a huge problem in the city, a huge problem. Part of it is crime, of course, but Trina is also referring to law enforcement response times to calls. Quote, you can't get the police here. There's either not enough officers or too much crime, or something's going on to the fact that we can't get any help or support here." In that same interview, Trina likens the way in which the neighborhood has gone downhill to the wild, wild west. The frustration and, honestly, fear in those statements is evident and honest. Here is a business owner speaking out and speaking up for just about all of the business owners in the immediate area. Something needs to be done. Owning a business you've worked your ass off for, in many cases decades, stirs a bit of personal animosity toward anyone out there seemingly working against you to destroy it. Michael and Trina have labored their fingers to the bone, long days and certainly even longer nights. And in the sales business, no matter how you feel or what you think about others or your town, you have to don that smile as if everything is perfectly fine. It takes a special kind of people person to do that job and not rip your hair out at the same time. Michael and Trina live just around the corner from Mr. Cars with a blended family of 3 children, a 6-year-old son, 13-year-old daughter, and another boy, 19-year-old Colin Zikowski. It's close to 9:30 p.m. on April 14th, 2017, when Colin's younger sister notices the time and says, "Mom and Dad are not home yet, and I'm concerned." Trina and Michael are pretty set in their routines and are generally walking through the door at the same time every night, somewhere near 6 p.m. If they didn't call and say they were going out to eat or somewhere else, they come right home. So Colin tells his little sister, "I'll go take a look at Mr. Carr's, see if they are just working late with a talkative customer asking too many damn questions." Colin pulls up to the lot and, right away, notices several things that appear to be out of order. Number one, the lights are off inside the showroom, yet his parents' car is still parked in the front. In fact, inside that car, it being Easter weekend, are several Easter baskets for the children. Even stranger, the front door to the showroom is wide open. And one of Trina and Michael's signature moves before locking up and going home is to park a few cars across the gate into the lot, cars they refer to as blockers to deter theft. But that had not been done. Colin pulls up slowly, closer to the front door, looks around, and doesn't see his parents anywhere. So he parks, gets out of his vehicle, and walks toward the showroom open door. Entering the building, he sees who he believes to be his mother, face down, lying in a pool of blood at the front desk. Obviously stunned and shocked, Colin immediately runs out of the building, jumps into his vehicle, locks the doors, and dials 911. First responders are there quickly, as are two detectives from the Cleveland Police Department, who pull Colin aside and ask him to explain exactly what he saw inside the building. That's about all he saw, considering how scared he was that someone might be inside the building still, and so he ran out. One of the detectives stays with Colin as his partner walks into the building to have a look around. He first comes upon Michael, who is at his desk, face down on top of it, as if he had been working and passed out. But of course, Michael is dead. Blood all over the place, dripping down onto the floor, more on the desktop. So the person Colin ran into as he walked in earlier was in fact his father, not his mother. As the detective works his way toward the office and back, he sees Trina at her desk. In the hallway along the corridor leading there, he finds the family dog, Axel. He's dead as well, shot at close range. So both Trina and Michael have been gunned down, murdered, along with the family dog. In these situations, it's important for police to not rush into any type of quick judgment. The obvious motive here is theft. But if you drill right down into that narrative, with side blinders shielding your vision, you might miss that all-important piece of the puzzle right there in front of you. So you have to, as simple as it sounds, just stay focused on what you have in the moment in front of you and not what you think you have. Law enforcement all agree that the murders took place within the last 4 to 5 hours, maybe even sooner, which is important to know at this early stage. They bring Colin to a secure area away from the scene and sit him down, get the boy a glass of water, and let him come to terms with what he just found. "What can you tell us?" one of the detectives asks. After all, Colin is a person of interest. Not necessarily a serious one, but he needs to be excluded. He says, as he looked around the lot, he noticed that 3 vehicles are missing: a BMW, Mercedes, and Tahoe. All high-value vehicles. Depending on the models, there could be upwards of close to $100,000 or more worth of inventory, and it's gone. That's a hell of a motive for murder, if those vehicles weren't sold recently. There is also word from the scene that Michael's wallet is missing. They cannot find his ID or any cash anywhere in the building. My dad always carried cash, Collins says. In fact, on that day, records show 2 customers had come in and made cash payments to Mr. Cars for a total of $7,500, but no sign of that money is anywhere. The other question is, did Michael and Trina have any enemies? Anyone threatening them? Some sort of business rival? Did they owe anyone money? All of those questions need to be answered. Again, the crime has all the earmarks of a double murder to cover the theft of property and cash. But good investigators don't work under assumptions. They nail everything down. Further leaning toward robbery as a motive, they go back into the building after the bodies of Michael and Trina are taken away and realize that the entire security system, including the DVR, has been ripped out. Both detectives then begin a canvass of the immediate area to see if any other businesses nearby have security cameras pointing at Mr. Cars and if those cameras are in working order. One business across the street seems to have a camera pointed directly at the front entrance, but it seems to be too far away and, especially at night, probably wouldn't pick up any footage worth much. Still, they contact the owner and get that video. 1 block north of the lot is a wireless phone store, which one would presume to have the latest and best technology watching over its property. And so they get that video as well, sit down and go through a long process of seeing if anything jumps out. As they do that work, late into the night, early the next morning, one of the detectives comes up with something. 2 people coming out of Mr. Cars around the same time they believe the murders would have occurred, between 5:30 and 6:30 p.m. And both are definitely shielding themselves from being seen by the camera. Please subscribe to Crossing the Line wherever you get your podcasts. Don't forget to leave a review of the show, especially on Apple Podcasts. I'm doing this show independently now, free from any corporate or big podcasting media company involvement, which allows me to bring you more of the content you want to hear and have asked me for. This is completely our show. Reviews and subscriptions really help. You are my public relations and social media team now, and without your help, I could not do this. And that support, I must tell you, means everything. It's incredibly humbling. And I want to thank each one of you for listening. We can grow the show together, which will allow me to do even bigger things with it. If you go to crossingtheline.biz or mwilliamphelps.com, you can contact me there to suggest cases or just say hello. And look for me across all social media platforms at M. William Phelps. That's the @ symbol and my name, M. William Phelps. Be right back after a short break. In his late 20s, Joseph McAlpin is a skinny dude, kind of petite, with a pencil-thin mustache and goatee, glasses, and a large tattoo covering one side of his neck. Those are pretty distinctive features. As McAlpin explains it, he'd had a tough life leading up to the year 2017, having shot himself in the leg with a gun his mother owned when he was just 5 years old, suffering terribly violent seizures since he was 12 after being hit in the head by a brick. And then, to top it all off, at 19, he found his mother dead from a heroin overdose. Not an easy life by any means. McAlpin's good friend, 23-year-old Andrew Keener, is hanging out with McAlpin's brother, Jerome Diggs, on April 14, 2017, on the east side of Cleveland, not far from Mr. Carr's, where Michael and Trina are, at that time, still working. It's near 4 p.m. McAlpin arrives and hops into the car where his brother and friend are sitting, seemingly looking for something to do. Jerome Diggs looks over at Andrew Keener and he says, "You want to make some money?" Keener shrugs. Diggs explains that he and McAlpin have been planning to hit a local spot for titles and keys. In other words, a car dealership. And being able to steal keys and titles, the vehicles will be easy to unload. All you have to do, Diggs adds, is drive a car off the lot. Near 5 p.m., McAlpin drives the three of them over to a side street near Mr. Carr's. McAlpin is dressed in layers, sweatpants, a hooded sweatshirt, and boots, but also wearing a second outfit underneath that. At one point, McAlpin makes a call. The others don't know who he is calling. Then he gets out of the car just after 5:15 p.m. As he opens the door, his sweatshirt catches part of the door frame and lifts up off his torso. Keener looks and sees that McAlpin has a gun tucked into his back. When McAlpin notices that Keener has eyes on his weapon, he quickly snugs his sweatshirt down and continues walking. McAlpin heads down the street toward Mr. Carr's and soon disappears around the corner. 10 minutes go by. Then 20. Diggs is a little antsy and anxious, and so he calls his brother to ask him what the hell is going on. Why is he taking so long? There's no answer. 5 more minutes passes, and McAlpin calls Keener and tells him there's a car in the lot ready to go. It's running. Come now. Keener gets out of the vehicle, walks into the lot, and sees McAlpin. The first thing that catches his eye is that McAlpin is wearing different clothes and a baseball hat, which is pulled down below his eye line. Keener sees a Mercedes running and gets in. He drives it down the block where Diggs is waiting for him. After he pulls over, Diggs hops in. He tells Keener to get into the passenger seat. He wants to drive. A moment later, McAlpin comes around the corner driving a BMW. They follow McAlpin to the west side of Cleveland. They ditch the Mercedes in a parking lot and both jump into the BMW. McAlpin is holding a stack of credit cards in his hand. From there, they meet up with McAlpin's girlfriend and another woman and go their separate ways. Days go by. Keener has not been paid for what he did, and he's pissed. So he calls Diggs and asks, "What's going on?" By now, Keener has seen in the newspaper and on TV that 2 people and a dog were brutally murdered at Mr. Carr's 2 nights before, and he realizes he is now involved in a double homicide. Diggs tells him they haven't sold the cars yet, and as soon as they do, he'll be paid. And if I could, I just want to interject here for one moment. And you might have heard me say this before, but 99% of murders are uncomplicated, and honestly, murderers, for the most part, are stupid. Most killers are just too caught up in their narcissism and sociopathy to see that the things they do will eventually get them caught. You cannot involve 3 people in a double murder and expect to get away with it. And if you are planning on listening to my narrative podcast releasing this week, 34 Fairview Road, please keep that thought in mind as you go into that case. Once the shoe drops, once detectives get a bead on the weakest link in a murder involving multiple suspects, he or she is going to crack like a twig to save their own ass. And in the Mr. Carr's double murder case, with the aggravating factors involved, it's likely that the death penalty will come into play. And one more thing. I chose this case to show that murder is murder, with the same devastating factors and effect on the lives of the victims' families as some of the more high-profile murders the media gloms onto. There's no difference between a murder we see on 3 different streaming documentaries and a double murder at a car dealership where two people are brutally slain inside their place of business. I think we miss the importance of this within all the coverage of true crime today. Murder is murder. People's lives are destroyed. When the autopsies come back, it's clear here that McAlpin walks into Mr. Carr's with the intent to kill. He shoots Michael directly in the forehead, that round traveling front to back, before firing a second round into Michael's left cheek that exits through his ear. There is stippling found around the head wound, little black specks extending outward, which tells the medical examiner that Michael's killer was standing about 18 inches to 3 feet away at the time he pulled the trigger. There is fouling around the wound on Michael's cheek, indicating that the muzzle of the weapon was at very close range, like inches away when that round was fired. Trina was shot in the back of the head. The stippling there telling the medical examiner that her killer stood about 3 feet away from her. Implicit within the evidence left at the crime scene and the autopsy is that McAlpin did not have to kill Trina. If he was worried about being overcome, once he took out and murdered Michael, the biggest threat to him, there was no reason to kill Trina other than for his own sick pleasure. Investigators believe McAlpin walks in, goes right up to Michael and murders him, kills the dog in the hallway, and then walks further down the hall to kill anyone else in the building. If the kids happened to be there, he would have almost certainly murdered them as well. Another almost certainty among most killers is their addiction to their cell phones. We all know that cell phones track every single move we make, wherever we go, timestamps, and also GPS coordinates. If you bring your cell phone to a crime scene, investigators will be able to make a map marking every step you take, and it will be used to prosecute you. So the fact that McAlpin stripped that outer layer of clothing inside the building after blood from his victim sprayed all over himself, and also wanted to throw off any CCTV catching him in the act of coming and going, is the hubris and ignorance he displays based on the fact that he had his cell phone inside his pocket the entire time. If that is not enough, McAlpin also called Mr. Carr's at 4:09 p.m. Of course, we don't know why he called, but his phone registers calling the building. There's also a fairly accurate time of death uncovered. A customer had called at 5 p.m. and spoke to Trina for 3 minutes. A friend of Trina and Michael's was inside the building until 5:03. Near this time, CCTV captures McAlpin walking by that wireless phone store heading towards Mr. Carr's. At 5:22, McAlpin's phone calls Keener. When they speak to that customer who called and spoke to Trina, he says he called back at 5:30, and by then, Trina was acting strange, speaking with a very low voice into the phone, trying to stay quiet. That was definitely Trina in her office, wondering what was going on out front after likely hearing yelling, a gunshot, or both. Besides the obvious sad and horrific nature of what transpired, that timeline is a huge part of the investigation. And as you go through McAlpin's phone records and Google searches throughout that night, it's all there. A murder map. So you see where I'm going with this. The evidence backs up witness statements. But there's more. An anonymous tipster who calls in several days after the murders claims that Jerome Diggs and McAlpin were involved in the murders at Mr. Carr's. This one might seem buttoned up, yet it does take an odd turn. And I'll get into that right after our final break. Be right back. takes about 2 months for investigators to tie what they believe is a guilty bow on this one. On June 8th, 2017, DNA comes back and matches McAlpin's DNA, already in the system, to DNA found on a modem in the back office of Mr. Carr's. Additional DNA found inside the back pocket of Michael's jeans and inside the stolen BMW, which had been recovered from a banquet parking lot in a southwestern Cleveland suburb, also matches McAlpin. There is no doubt Joseph McAlpin committed these murders. Yet, when his buddy Keener steps up and admits to his role in exchange for a lighter sentence, McAlpin initiates a campaign claiming he was set up and framed. You know, all that conspiracy nonsense we sometimes hear. When the case goes to trial, McAlpin represents himself, the ultimate narcissistic move for an accused murderer at this stage. He maintains his innocence throughout the entire ordeal, despite all of the forensic and circumstantial evidence against him, including a witness who was there with him on the day he committed the murders. In his closing argument, McAlpin, making little sense, says, quote, "We all know the community's in an uproar. The commissioner or whoever it is. The councilman. We need answers now, and they're blowing down, making something happen." In other words, because of pressure to solve the crime, they chose him. There are no surprises during the trial. It takes the jury 2 days, and I commend them for taking that long to find him guilty on all 26, yes, 26 felony charges, including cruelty to animals. Here's the judge after the jury votes to send McAlpin to death row.
In every jury trial, the court tells the jury to evaluate the case on the law as it is given to them. The court admonishes them not to apply their own conception of what they believe the law should be. I can follow no different directive. On Thursday of last week, the jury found that the aggravating circumstances outweighed the mitigating factors beyond reasonable doubt, and therefore found the verdict of death to be appropriate.
Death row cases are an important part of the true crime space to take a close look at. We need to evaluate how the death penalty is used in this country, whether you are for or against it. I tend to stand in the middle by saying that I support what a jury chooses to do in each case. That job, having life and death in your hands, is a tremendous burden on any soul sitting on a jury. So for me, I have to respect that decision, whether I agree with it or not. The prosecutor stands and speaks. This verdict is not a victory. It's just a necessary step in our criminal justice process. It does not bring back Michael or Trina to their children and family. McAlpin's horrific actions warrant the death penalty. 24-year-old Jerome Diggs Jr. and 25-year-old Andrew Keener faced multiple charges for their alleged role, including multiple counts of aggravated murder, aggravated robbery, and aggravated burglary. Remember that anonymous tip I mentioned? That was from a UPS driver in the area at the time who saw the three of them in the lot getting ready to take off in stolen vehicles. Keener pleaded to first-degree felony involuntary manslaughter and fourth-degree felony grand theft. Jerome Diggs took his case to trial, but before it went to court, the prosecution dropped all the charges, announcing it was going to be too difficult to win the case, and the family was behind that decision, as they wanted to seek closure and not have to go through all of it again. Keener awaits sentencing. That'll do it for this week. In just a few days, my first limited series, Under the Crossing the Line with M. William Phelps brand, drops at 6 p.m. It's this Thursday, October 17th. Look for new Crossing the Line episodes every Tuesday at midnight. I won't be missing a beat with this show. But for the next 10 weeks, every Tuesday and Thursday, you'll get a double dose of true crime from me. I need your help. Please subscribe to Crossing the Line wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget leave a review of the show, especially on Apple Podcasts, and log on to crossingtheline.biz or mwilliamphelps.com to contact me and suggest cases, or just say hi. And look for me across all social media platforms using the @ symbol and my name, M. William Phelps. Thank you for supporting this show. I am allowed to do it because of you, and that truly means more to me than I can say. I cannot sign off without, of course, saying, be safe, be aware. Sources for this episode include Supreme Court of Ohio, Mr. Carr's Murder Opinion, June 15th, 2021. I also used various news video and police reports. Crossing the Line is executive produced by M. William Phelps, LLC, and Matthew Valentinus, Mom's Basement Management. Written by me, M. William Phelps. Audio mastering and mixing by Matt Russell. Original music written and performed by Thomas Mooney, Tom Phelps, and Matt Russell.